Welcome, everyone. I'm Melodie Bahan. I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota Film and TV, and I am so excited to have these incredible women here to talk to us and tell us their stories and answer our questions. I am going to let them do most of the talking, but let me just tell you who we have here. And let me just say, as a blanket statement, these are all women, award-winning filmmakers and documentarians. So there's that. And then individually, we have Maya Washington. Maya's, and I'm just gonna mention one piece of work from each of them that you should absolutely see if you haven't. Maya's documentary, Through the Banks of the Red Cedar, is about her father, Gene Washington, who was a member of the first fully integrated college football team in America. And right now it is airing on the Big Ten network, and it's got 2 more air dates and times. The first one being Thursday, December 24th at 3 p.m. and then Monday, December 28th at 5:30 p.m. That's the Big Ten network. So I'm thrilled that Maya is here, and she's got a lot going on, so we'll find out about that. Kelly Nathe is also, award winner, blah, blah, blah. And I would highly recommend that you watch her film Minnesota 13, From Grain to Glass, which you can find streaming on tpt.org. This film is about something I had no idea, that Stearns County was sort of the moonshine capital of the North during Prohibition. And who knew? Well, everyone in Stearns County obviously did, but it's a great documentary and you should take a look at that. And also joining us is my very longtime friend, Keri Pickett. And her documentary feature, First Daughter and the Black Snake, follows environmental activist Winona LaDuke and her family and community efforts to keep big oil out of her tribe's sacred wild rice territory. And just an incredibly gorgeous portrait of this woman and the work that she's doing. So I believe it is streaming on Amazon now. Yeah, so welcome to all of you. And in no particular order, I would like you to talk a little bit about your path, how you got from where you started to where you are. And maybe first somebody can give us a rundown of Film Fatales, what the organization is, what you do, how you become a member. Who wants to take that?
Kelly, you want to take it?
Kelly.
Okay, well, Film Fatales is a global organization of women directors of feature films and serial television. And it started with a woman in New York who, Leah Meyerhoff, who found some success with her first film at Sundance. And then, as with a lot of women, you kind of hit a wall. And she wanted to find peers who had also directed feature films. And so she created a sort of a dinner party, and it grew, and chapters popped up all around the country and then all around the nation. And our chapter in Minneapolis started about 3.5 years ago, I think. Melody Gilbert moved back to town and wanted to start a chapter here. And you needed to have 14 directors in your community who fit the bill. And that meant you had to direct a feature film that had played at a certain caliber of film festival. It could be a narrative or a documentary, or you had to direct a certain caliber of serial television. but you needed 14 of them. And I think most of us in this community knew maybe 3 or 4 of each other. No way did we believe there were 14 of us that were currently active, but Melodie found them all and we created a chapter and we've been meeting ever since. The organization has sort of restructured as a nonprofit now, and now you can join from anywhere as long as you fit the bill of a requirement. And then there's also a sort of a junior level where you're aspiring to get your first feature completed, where you can be mentored or be part of the community. They do a lot of advocacy for women directors, and the Parity Pipeline, where they submit us to certain programs, Sundance Lab, things like that, where we sort of get a closer look than just the general admission, as organizations and companies try to find parity with directors, women and women identifying directors. Film Fatales has really done a lot of the hard work and the heavy lifting to strive for that. And all the way from hiring directors to also programmers and gatekeepers and selection committees for where your films get shown and where they land at the end. So that's Film Fatales. You can go to filmfatales.org to find out more about it.
Great.
And if you are a woman or woman identifying filmmaker in our community and you want to know more about us, just send Melodie your email and she'll forward it to us and we will get a hold of you and let you know when we're meeting next.
Great.
Our
Thank
local
you.
group kind of started in a way like the national one, because we all started out in one another's homes, having dinner parties once a month. And so that was really a great opportunity for us to build community and to learn about one another's films and aspirations. And it's been great medicine for all of us, I think, to know one another and to have that opportunity to talk shop at a high level, because everybody needs to be mentored. And I think mentorship is going to be a thing that grows within Film Fatales. But it's been really, really great to just be able to be with other women where you just can kind of cut to the chase of, you know, you don't have to explain everything of how you got to where you got to be. You just are just like, how can I get where I need to go now?
Yeah, we have a point in every meeting where it's like, what do you need? And everyone can say, and it can be something very specific, like, I need a publicist. My film's about to go to a film festival. Oh, you know, people chime in, try this person, you know, or I need help finishing my grant proposal. Everybody needs help on every level. And we've become a pretty close-knit community here. With COVID, of course, we can't meet in each other's homes or backyards anymore, but and everything kind of felt disjointed, but Film Fatales HQ, as we like to call them, they've been putting on panels and discussions almost every week, sometimes a couple times a week, that really dig into like serious issues. And the conversations have been incredible. And those are available to members of Film Fatales, but they're available to the general public too. So you can follow Film Fatales on Facebook and Instagram, and you hear more about that.
If you sign up for their newsletter, then you can more easily find out. They're usually on Fridays and not always, but it's a great opportunity to see a wide array of industry topics, you know, everything from scripting to publicity to, I mean, every week it's a different topic. So it's a really great resource.
That's great. You know, the one thing that has happened during this pandemic has been, I think we've all gotten access to learning opportunities that maybe we didn't know were out there. And those professional meetings have been just a gift to so many of us who have been able to take advantage of that. Now I want to return to
including these, by the way, Melodie, thank you for putting these on.
Oh,
They're really great. Yeah.
It's great. Oh, good. Thank you. Um, I want to return to some bigger issues about women and film, but first, I would like to have each of you just introduce yourselves a little more fully. Talk about, again, your path, how you got here, and what you're currently working on. So, Maya, I pick you.
Okay, I'm picked. My name's Maya Washington and grew up here in the Twin Cities. Grew up as an actor in the Twin Cities, so child actor, youth performance company, children's theater company, went off to LA to study acting. Really had an interesting experience in LA because it was so different from the Twin Cities, right? Where I just thought everyone was really serious about the arts and really had this social justice lens, and all of the things that I was sort of raised with here were kind of a rude awakening for me in Los Angeles. And so that's what I did, pursued acting, continued to have a career as an actor, primarily in theater, but also did commercials. I was a model for a stint. And quickly recognized, like, both as a woman but also as a person of color, the opportunities that existed just did not suit the rigorous contribution I think I wanted to make as an artist. That I felt that while some actors are very happy to just say, oh, I'm in whatever, I'm on TV, and that was the point. But I found that no, there's actually something more to why I do this, why I want to embody characters or tell stories. And so I got my MFA in creative writing after my time at USC. I did a BA in dramatic arts and theater, took some film classes, but primarily was just focused on acting. And then got an MFA at Hamlin and started writing across genres is kind of the approach to that program. So I had entered as a playwright with a play that had toured the Twin Cities that I wrote, that was commissioned sort of because the theater knew me and they had a grant and they needed to, like, it was those kinds of things that happened in the Twin Cities just organically. But I decided, I want to really take this further, take writing further, and got the MFA at Hamlin, graduated as a poet. So I did my thesis in poetry and continued to be sort of a multi-hyphenate artist until I thought I had this idea for a narrative short film, which eventually became White Space. It's a film about a deaf performance poet performing for a hearing audience for the first time. And so for me, the whole reason I made it was because I loved poetry. I loved the communities that I was part of, but I also was really interested in the ways that hearing artists and anyone with a disability takes for granted, that does not have a disability, takes for granted the ways that we consume art, consume media, communicate, share our work. So my greatest hope was to make a film that maybe people like myself, who were poets, who are actors, who are performing artists, would think, maybe we should be more inclusive. And I had no idea that the film was going to travel all over the world and win all of these awards. And it won Best Short at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival in 2012, I believe it was. And that just sort of, once I got the bug, it was like, oh, this is it. This makes sense. All of the different parts of myself. There's always some kind of literary component to what I do. So with White Space, I put out a poetry anthology featuring the work of deaf and hearing artists. We did educational residencies. And so that kind of continues to be sort of a foundation of my work as a multidisciplinary artist, is really how I describe myself. And so working in film and both narrative and documentary allows me to do all of the things that I love to do, and do them in ensemble or in collaboration with other artists.
Great. And I don't think you mentioned this. You're also among your many other talents. I first knew you as a dancer, right? You were.
You have an amazing memory. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that is exactly how I started.
Yeah.
In dance classes at 8. I, wanted to be Debbie Allen.
Uh-huh.
And,
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? I still want to be Allen.
Yeah.
But I quickly sort of realized as I got involved in musical theater that, I could have a career in musical theater, whereas to really go all the way as a dancer and just sort of recognizing the amount of commitment and sacrifice that that would take, I sort of chose to focus on on acting. But yeah, thank you for thank you. Yes. And I'm in a fellow Fatal who I can give a plug to, Mary Beth Romslow, put out a piece called Kitchen Dance that I'm actually dancing in. And it's a really cool conceptual art piece that she did in collaboration with an exhibit at Minnesota Institute for the Arts. It's an actual important kitchen that was turn of the century way that women were trying to find more facility in the home. So you'll see dancers, were kind of scooting around in a kitchen. But that's an aside. But yeah. I'm also a dancer, and that was really fun to be able to share that with a fellow Fatal who I really got to know because of the group. So
great. And you have a memoir coming out soon that you're just finishing up now. And it the same title as your film, yes?
Yes. So Through the Banks of the Red Cedar is about my dad and his teams at Michigan State and the Minnesota Vikings, who were really pioneers in basically really integrating the sport of football, because there was a time when there wasn't Black representation, if you can believe that. There was a time when Black men weren't playing football in mainstream colleges and universities, or even in the pros. So my dad and his teammates were part of that. And so similar to White Space and sort of all my work, in addition to creating the film, of course, when you do that amount of research and you spend as much time as I did in that history, a colleague of mine who was acquiring manuscripts for a press was like, hey, have you thought about making this, a memoir? And I was like, actually, that was, coming. That was how I think eventually there would be some kind of literary component. And so Little A acquired the book, and it will be out in fall 2021. And so a lot of the things that I wasn't able to include in, a 67-minute film, and to really delve into the history of African Americans in football, the history behind my parents' journey growing up in the segregated South, and then a little more of my personal journey as their child, kind of first generation to be raised in an integrated environment, to be raised in Minnesota. My parents are from Texas by way of Louisiana. So yeah, it's been a really fun experience, but kind of grueling and interesting to switch gears to take a story that was always intended for a documentary to this other space of prose, which has been really challenging and fun.
Great. Well, we will look forward to that. Keri, let's go to you next.
How about our challenges? Later.
Yeah. So Keri, I first knew as a still photographer, and you actually took one of my favorite photos of me. So, but how did you make that transition from stills to video to film?
Well, as a photographer, I was always a documentary photographer, and my got my start as a photojournalist at the Village Voice newspaper in the 80s, and then worked for People magazine through the 90s doing upfront human interest feature stories. And so I think that, I've always been based in and rooted in reality and in storytelling. So my uncle has the largest archive of the history of theatrical ice skating and the Great American Touring Ice Shows. And so people come to see him, skaters come from all around the country. And I would see how excited he would get when he went off to these ice skating reunions, and he would come back all hoarse and he couldn't even talk because he'd been having so much fun. And I would tell all these filmmakers, I would go, there's this really amazing world of the ice shows. And, my uncle has all this knowledge and all this stuff. And, you could maybe do a film about him or about this. And so, nobody ever really took me up on it. And so I just thought, okay, well, I better get going and figure this out. And so I got a camera, and I hired a grad student at the U of M to come and work with me for $15 an hour. This was in 2006, I think, and teach me how to edit. And so I started making short films as I was, just in order to learn how to edit. And all the while I was going to these figure skating reunions and filming people and amassing, looking for motion picture footage around the country and going to Washington and looking in the archives and everything. And so it took me almost 8 years, but I made my first film, The Fabulous Ice Age. And it premiered at the Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Festival and won an award and did very well. And then I went off to my first outstate film festival, which was at the Napa Valley Film Festival in California. And lo and behold, these people from Netflix were in the audience, and they fell in love with my film. And you don't get acquired directly through Netflix. You have to have a aggregator. But anyway, Virgil Films and Entertainment became my distributor, and my film came out in 10 languages on Netflix. And so I was told by my distributor that that doesn't happen very often, where somebody's film goes in 10 languages. So it was all the Nordic languages and all throughout South America. And it was huge. I was just amazed, because then I just dropped out of the film festival world. I was like, well, what am I going to continue on with that? And I kind of wish I had continued on so that I would learn more. But then as soon as I was finished with The Fabulous Ice Age, my very good friend Winona LaDuke was busy starting to face the Sandpiper pipeline from Enbridge. In 2013, Enbridge announced that they wanted to put the Sandpiper pipeline through northern Minnesota and run it to Lake Superior in Superior, Wisconsin. And so in 2014, I filmed her ride against the pipeline, which was the start of a realization of a dream that she had, that's how she would oppose the pipeline, is through a sacred horse ride. And so I filmed that, and then traveled with her to New York for the People's Climate March, where I walked with the Indigenous bloc at the beginning of the People's Climate March. And I kind of went, oh, I think this is something that I have to commit to on a larger scale. And so I decided to do a film about Winona's vision and dream, and pretty much stuck with her. And the film came out in 2017. And over the 3 years of filming her, you just don't know where a story goes. I always like to say that being a documentary filmmaker is like buying a really expensive one-way ticket to an unknown destination. because you don't know what's going to happen. You start out and you're just committed to the fact that you know a story is there, but you don't know how it's going to end, and you just have to go with it. And sometimes they don't go anywhere and your work doesn't go anywhere. But in this case, it was a portrait of Winona and also a portrait of her family and community's efforts to oppose the Sandpiper. And then in 2015, line 3 was added. And so for those of you who are watching Enbridge and watching the state of Minnesota, much to the chagrin of most Native communities, line 3 has just been permitted. And this morning, we had 2 lockdowns in Palisade where they're opposing the line 3. And so this is a story that I would say my film encapsulates part 1 of, and I think part 2 is starting right now. And in between we had Standing Rock. And so, you know, I think that Indigenous resistance to extreme energy extraction, you know, is leading the way for environmentalists and for our country, I think. So let's see what happens. And so through Film Fatales and through our monthly meetings and getting to know one another, director Dawn Mickelson, invited me to join a project that she was starting called Her Beat, about a woman's dream to realize bringing together the best female taiko drummers in North America and in Japan to learn from one another and have a great big huge performance. And so pretty much right away, Dawn got a job up in Duluth, and I got a promotion to co-director. And so Dawn and I are doing the film together since she wasn't able to come to Japan with me and film in Japan. And then the filming happened in February, and this dream of bringing these women together happened in February, and we wrapped on March 2nd. Wow. And so it was really lucky for us to wrap a 2-year production right at the beginning of the COVID shutdown. So I did the first round of editing and took our 2-camera cinema verite project of filming over a 2-year period and edited it down to 10 hours. And then now it's going off to a new editor, and we're hoping to have a film, you know, in the spring.
Great.
But it's beautiful and a very, very inspiring story. I was told that the performance at the Ordway Theater on leap year of 2020, my publicist, Martin Keller, was in the audience, and he said that, you know, he's the rock and roll guy. He knows performance, right? He said it was one of the best performances he had ever been to. Wow. Ever. So, and I have a lot of people who were there who really felt it was very special. So I think it's going to be a special film.
Great. Well, we're definitely looking forward to that. And you said so many things that I want to follow up on. But first, let's talk to Kelly. So Kelly, what was your path? And you've worked a lot in episodic television. So how did you get there, and what are you doing now?
Well, I started in rock and roll. I worked in a recording studio, and I was an assistant engineer. And this is back when they recorded on 2-inch tape.
Oh.
And I would have to visualize on the tape, like each track, like here's the bass, here's the drums, here's the guitar, the vocal. Every time I'd be setting up the machine and cleaning the heads and setting up the board, I was translating into something visual. And then when I got burnt out on that job, it was like, well, duh, why don't you go to film school? So I went to well, it's now MCTC. Minneapolis Community College had just absorbed the Film in the Cities filmmaking program. And so I was one of the first students there in the video production, because I couldn't start film because I was starting in the middle of the year. And I ended up doing both film and video there, a 2-year program, but because I did both, I was there for about 3 years. And then I transferred to MCAD, because at the time that was the only place you could finish your 4-year degree and make films, not just study theory. But they wouldn't accept all my transfer credits. So I made some student films, and they ended up at the Walker and on Independent Film Channel and things like that, and had a little bit of success. And I decided to move to New York, and I got lucky there too. And I worked for a couple who were independent film producers. They had a company called Forensic Films, Scott McCauley and Robin Harris, and they Robin O'Hara, sorry. And they were making really cool films. They were doing the Harmony Korine films and working with John Waters. And I just loved them, and I loved working for them, but I hated making narrative films. I hated the long hours. I hated the physical labor. I hated the never-ending fundraising and all of the stuff that they did. And then I got a chance to go shoot for one day with Michael Moore on a project that he was finishing. And I grabbed a camera and I followed him around for the day and went into the edit with him. And it was like, this is what I want to do. I like small crews. I like telling real stories. I like following the action. I like running around. And so I moved back here to Minneapolis and worked in the nonprofit world. I went to work for Film North, which was IFP North then. And I started making documentary films, and I got a grant to go to Bosnia, and I made a short film right after the war ended there. And I had a lot of success with that on the festival circuit. And that felt pretty good. And then I moved to LA. I lived out there for about 15 years. And I worked for IFP West, which is now Film Independent. And I worked for the LA Film Festival, and I worked for the Sarajevo Film Festival. And in between, I would make short docs. And then I got a chance through somebody I knew on the festival circuit to work for this British company that was coming to LA to do kind of a docu-follow series called Airline, where we followed people at the airport and Southwest Airlines. And it was filmed exactly like a documentary crew, very small people, run and gun, follow the action. And then everything would be sent to London and chopped up into this just kind of cheesy entertainment show, which was fun, but there wasn't a lot of substance there. But I liked the technique, and I liked working in that world and what we would do on a day-to-day basis. So I kept trying to find jobs like that. And in between, I would go work for production companies or nonprofits. And then I started collaborating with other filmmakers and made a couple feature films as a producer and co-director, and moved back to Minneapolis. And then when I moved back here, I started working in kind of lifestyle television, which is very similar to documentary, as a segment producer, which is really finding the story and digging in and setting everything up for the crew to go follow. And I've been doing that the last few years and trying to get some doc projects going and developing television series.
Oh, great. Well,
and I like getting paid. Working in the world is very nice because you get paid usually, and you don't have to spend your time fundraising because that's a different department, and you get to make stuff, and it ends up somewhere very quickly, and somebody else has to figure that part out. So I like being a part of that world, focusing just on finding the good story, but that's intermittent as well.
Yeah. Well, this actually answers for you anyway one of the questions that I had coming into this, which is, um, you are all in the documentary world, although, you know, doing other things as well. But is that an artistic choice? Is it a financial choice? Are women more likely to be documentarians than narrative filmmakers? And what is that an issue, do you think? Or is it just a personal choice?
Well, for me, it's a
Keri?
personal choice.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly imagining doing stories that blur the line,
Mm.
you know, where it's a hybrid, where it's film documentary style, but it's really a narrative structure.
Mm-hmm.
I love Richard Linklater. He's my
Mm.
favorite filmmaker, and his
Mhm.
style, I mean, he does so much pre-production
Right.
on everything, but you don't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. And so I don't know, maybe there'll be something down the road for that. But again, the fundraising part of it, it's endless. It's
Yeah.
endless.
Keri, what about you? Is that, I mean, is narrative filmmaking at all of interest to you, or is that just not something you care about? You
I
want
have
to
an
do?
epic script that I've been wanting to write for years that's totally in my head, that's based on my father's life and research that my sister and I went around the country and did for a few years about his life for a
Mhm.
book. And we had some creative, we had just some creative differences about a way to approach it. And I was thinking, well, you know, I could really see just moving it all over into a script. But I have some other things to get done first.
Yeah. And Maya, your work, I mean, you're multidisciplinarian, and you have worked both in the narrative and the documentary world. Are there advantages to one or the other, or is it?
Well, I think kind of what Kelly was saying, the best and most challenging thing for me about documentary is, and I think Keri was saying this too, that you just don't know where this is going to go, and you just you're beholden to the story, and you sort of you have no control really. Whereas with narrative, you know, I have completed 2 narrative short films. And it's possible that in the same time that it took me to make Through the Banks of the Red Cedar, I could have produced a narrative feature,
Mhm.
with the same moxie and shoestring, gum and scotch tape, you know, that I made the doc. So I'd say that for me is like the biggest difference. So while I was sort of in post on Through the Banks of the Red Cedar, I finished another narrative short film called Clear, and it stars George Keller, local actress. So
Oh, yeah.
everything was shot here. And it's a family reconnecting after a wrongful conviction. So George's character is coming home after a 16-year prison sentence for a crime she didn't commit, trying to reconnect with the family. So from a subject matter standpoint, it was really rewarding, I think, both with, you know, White Space and with Clear, to try to find a way into a fictional narrative about real things that are happening to real people right now. So I hope that it just sort of happens the way things work, especially if you're a woman or you're a person of color or whatever identity situation you're in, and also kind of speaks to the, I don't know, the lack of imagination that the industry is, you know, has had in general. So first of all, just imagine that women make things and do it really well. That's like, whoa. And that Black people, what, have like stories about things other than the painful things that white people have done to us. So I think what I'm excited about this like new, this new chapter, this new reality is that so many of us are, Jack and Jills of all trades, and that there are a lot of different ways to approach a story, and that because of the way the industry has had a lack of imagination, it's been very freeing for me to do whatever I want because no one's been paying attention anyway. You know what I mean? So
Right.
if I want to tell a story and the story says, this is the container, it is a short film, it is a narrative short film, or it is documentary. But the point I was making that took a long turn was that even though I have this imagination, sometimes the industry doesn't. So if I have a feature documentary out right now, and while that's sort of an area where people are getting to know me, that's the kind of work that I'm being offered, or those opportunities are coming up to pitch other documentary projects or to work in the commercial space, because that's popular now, where brands want sort of pseudo documentaries and ways of promoting their brand that feel like they're grounded in reality and stuff like that. So in terms of the things that pay me, and being in Minnesota and not in LA or New York, those are kinds of the opportunities that seem to exist, is that documentary is that thing. But I really love narrative, and hope that I will be able to produce a screenplay that I have on the shelf, and some other work that I'm interested in.
How important is it to you all as filmmakers to have a very strong message of social justice part of your creative process? And do you see younger filmmakers and your peers moving more in that direction over the last few years?
Well, I think documentary has certainly exploded with, I feel like if I can become a filmmaker as my second career, transitioning at age 50, anybody can do it. Really. I mean, no, I came from a documentary world, but I think just the tools have become much more available.
Yeah, right?
Well, so I think that people are just interested in social justice, and I don't see it maybe being a little bit more on the rise because we have a need for it more. But I don't know that it's on the rise more, or if there's just more filmmakers and a more urgent sense of, adversity has always helped create art.
It's also where the funding dollars have gone in the last, I'd say, I noticed a shift in the last 7-8 years of, if you're trying to get one of the higher caliber documentary funds, you have to have something in there that for a long time you had to have something that was an issue based. And because those are the films that were getting funded, those are the films that were getting finished. And because those are the films getting finished, those are the films ending up on the festival circuit and winning the awards. And they're all fabulous films, and they deserved to be made and deserve to be told. There was a little bit of a pushback a couple of years ago, maybe sort of Trump fatigue, where funders were questioning if they need to base their decisions solely on what the core issue of a documentary film is, and if we should be expanding what we're looking to fund. I haven't written a grant in a few years, so I'm not sure if that's trickled down into practicality or not, but it's an ongoing conversation. Now, I think it's always, I don't personally, I think it's always more of a hook to have some meat there. I mean, I like a good portrait. I like a good character study. I like a slow burn on a film. But when I go to a film festival, when we used to go in person, you know, and you look at the catalog, I'm going to go to the one that sounds like I'm going to cry the most, or be moved the most, or learn the most, or be transported to a universe that I could never enter any other way. And those usually have some meat at the center that's social justice or some identity issue in there.
Right, right. Now, we've got a couple of questions coming in from people, so I want to make sure we get to those. So let me just ask you, are any of you, I know the answer to this, are any of you represented by agents? If so, how helpful has it been to have representation? And if not, is it something you feel you need in order to move forward? So do you have an agent? No?
I
No?
don't, and I haven't considered it because I sort of bounce around between gigs that are not the same.
Yeah, yeah. And Keri, no agent? No? Feel you need one?
I don't know. I just, I don't know. Do I need one? I don't know.
Oh no.
Busy. I'm pretty busy just doing my art. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
It's just, I'm not really about being all for hire. So, and when
Mhm.
I place my art, I just hope that it's like, gets to where it goes based on itself.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I think it'd be great to have an agent. Be fun. Have somebody on your team. Why not?
What about you,
Maya?
Maya?
Yeah, well, I'm represented as an actress. So I have agents here in the Twin Cities, and then also in Los Angeles. But as a filmmaker, I'm not represented. And, you know, I have relationships with production companies in the commercial space. That sort of, you don't have an agent, you have a production company that sort of reps you, or that when they're pitching opportunities to, you know, make commercials for Target or Best Buy or General Mills or whoever we have locally, those production companies like bid for those jobs, and then they might, in addition to saying what they can do and why they can do it, they might put up a director for that. Do you know what I mean? So I could see that being something I will likely commit to more seriously. The pandemic, pandemic is what the pandemic is, but I had at the beginning of when was that? I don't even remember what.
March of this year.
I have, but I'm so 2019. So spring of 2019, I was in a program called Commercial Directors Diversity Program, and it's for diverse directors to be introduced to the commercial space, which is even more underrepresented than indie film or even mainstream film. Like, you would be shocked how there is no diversity in terms of who's directing these commercials that we see every day. So that was an eye-opener, but also in terms of like a logistic reason, or the person, you know, who asked the question, I saw it's like strategically, if you want to work in commercials, that's kind of what you have to do. You either have to be aligned with a production company that's pitching you similar to the way an agent would, or you know, network and you do it that way. But I agree with Keri and Kelly that as a indie filmmaker in Minnesota, I find that I'm much better off representing myself and going for opportunities or networking or being able to like really champion work that I'm really proud of and really passionate about, because I found that work I've done for hire, even without an agent, is just like a really interesting experience, because your value systems and what you believe in and the frequency that you operate on and the integrity that you bring into the world, you have to be mindful, at least that's how I feel, about who I align myself with, because I've really, as an actor, you know, experienced that. I can't even talk, I really don't know how many LA agents I've had over the course of my career. Like if I tried to count them, I couldn't, or even name all of their names. But what would be really frustrating is if you don't have someone who's completely aligned with who you are, what your values are, what you're into and what you're not into, like isn't really smart in that way, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, because they're going to pitch you for things that you're not right for, or things you are right for. Maybe they're not going to understand why they should be more aggressive or they should do what they need to do. And a friend of mine, who's a very amazing woman, her name is Erica Gilchrist. She's a amazing motivator of women and a motivational speaker out of Chicago. And someone I called lamenting about, gosh, I just am so sick of having agents and nothing's going and it's not working. And she said, Maya, no one can represent Maya Washington better than Maya Washington. And it kind of helped me like dry my eyes and be like, she's right. And I found that in anything that has had sort of a sense of purpose in my life and in my artistic career and has done something significant that has had an impact in some positive way on the lives of other people, has really been because I represented myself. I represented the work and I moved in the integrity that is important to me. And I think that's the thing, like until I find an agent or manager who cares about me and my work and cares with the integrity that I care about it, why do you know, why, unless you are recognizing that, okay, I'm going to go work in commercials or I'll work in episodic television. That's someone else's vision. That's something you're signing up for. Or if you're going to be a staff writer, or even a showrunner or a show creator, or all these different paths that you can take, when you do that, you understand that it's not your intellectual property at some point. And then at some point, it's just part of the deal, where you can be a person of integrity, but there are some things that you're going to have to work with and systems you'll have to work around. And at this chapter of my career, I'm chilling. I'm you know, I'm doing me, and that's, you know, knock on my own knuckles, working for me for now.
Great. All right, Keri, yeah, we've got some more questions, but go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it back with this with the agent thing, for how Film Fatales has become a networking thing and how we really have all worked with one another, you know, whether it's been as a DP like myself or within somebody else's film, as Maya and Mary Beth's film and stuff. So anyway, it's kind of, we've been our own agents for one another too, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I just have to say, the Fatales allowed me to come to part of one of their evenings, and it was like a warm embrace, you know. These women started just throwing out problems, just like Keri was saying, and they all came together and it's like, okay, solved, we're done. We took care of everyone's problems. So really heartwarming. So I want to make sure we get to all these questions. Diana, this is a question for Keri. Since you mentioned that you basically started this career at age 50, have you run into ageism?
Well, I think because I'm kind of a one-woman band, and because I'm my own producer, director, cinematographer, and to some degree editor as well, um, I, I, I just don't think about it like that, and I just go ahead. But yeah, I would say for sure it's I think everybody knows that that it's a it's a sort of a thing out there that women, as they age, they say they become more and more invisible. But when we're only 6% of the whole industry as directors to begin with, I think we're already starting out kind of invisible. And so I just think we're in a pretty small minority, and it's going to grow, because I just think it's got to.
I can speak to that a little bit too. I
Yeah.
mean, I lived in LA until about 4 years ago, and as a producer or associate producer or segment producer, I couldn't even get called back for an interview because very clearly I was a mother and I was of a certain age, meaning like mid-30s. It was ridiculous. It was painful. I moved back to Minnesota. I had a job interview before I even landed and got hired immediately for something I had never done. And this was at Tremendous because they looked at all that I had done on my own and realized that my skills transferred. And it was a relief. It was a big break for me to be valued for this wealth of knowledge that I had built over my lifetime, and that being a mother was not a curse as well. Right. So it's real. I think in the documentary world specifically, however, the independent documentary world, you see women our age making their first film all the time. You see, like I say, it's an industry you can grow old gracefully in, and that you're actually valued the older you are, where I don't see that in work for hire as much. But certainly, if, like Keri said, if you're doing your own thing and making your own stories, your life story is valued.
Yeah, I can still hold the camera for every day.
Well, they're getting lighter and lighter. So yeah, but that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is, for those of you that have left New York and Los Angeles, do you ever regret leaving those cities and moving back to Minnesota? And has it
only in February?
And has it affected your ability to work?
No, for me, the opposite. I've been busier than ever since I moved back here. I think having gone away and having that on my resume, I think that helps. Even when I went to New York and I moved back here, that looked cool, Yeah. It helped. But I don't regret moving to those places. I think it's really, really important to me. Living in New York City and working for those producers was my grad school. I learned more in the 2 years I was out there working for these filmmakers in documentary and narrative than I would have learned going to film school. And it was awesome. LA was more of a lifestyle choice, moving out there with my partner, starting a family. It's not the place I would have gone for my career because I knew I wanted to do documentary, and documentary is not the thing out there. But I'm glad I did it. But I always kept a foot here, and I was always collaborating and making films back here. At least the last 8-9 years I lived in LA. So Minneapolis is it. And there's a support for the arts, and as Maya said at the beginning, it's like there's an awareness. There's a desire to have community, to build community, to create community, to tell stories, to be a part of something, where in those places it's a little more competitive, and I don't feel that here.
Right. We just have a couple more minutes, so I have one question that somebody sent me, Susan sent me before we started. She wanted to know, and it's such a great question, how you have been experiencing this year as filmmakers. What new toolkits have you had to create for yourself, or are you simply just taking the year off? And I know that's not happening for any of you. So what has this past year been like for you?
Well, as I mentioned, for me, it was fabulous to be able to just dive into the edit. And I had never been, I had never worked with a second camera person with me before. And so I had never edited a 2-camera verite film before. And so for me, it's been fabulous because I just was able to dive into that first round of editing. And then now I'm working on a new book. And so I'm doing interviews over the phone. And so it's kind of, I'm being very creative, but in my pod.
Yeah. And Maya, I know you've been incredibly busy.
Yeah, I mean, the year, you know, I forgot what year it was there for a minute in terms of like where we were. And I think it's been, my dad has an expression that every day is a gift. So I really just kind of moved in that experience of every day as a gift and just being like profoundly grateful that I'm still here, that the people I love and care about, most of us are still here. I went to a virtual funeral before this panel. So, you know, a friend lost her brother, and their family did the services before I, you know, came here. So it's like, I think, again, I really feel grateful that having integrity behind what I do and the work that I do, and that this was not a year where I had to have like a crisis about the meaning of my life or my sense of purpose on the planet, that I think a lot of people are grappling with, you know, or people who may have felt like there was a dream they didn't go after, or something they were going to do, or they're thinking about doing. And it's a very existential time, I think, for a lot of people. So for me, you know, Through the Banks of the Red Cedar found its broadcast home on the Big Ten Network. This, you know, that first airing was in November, and then the next two are at the end of the month. The manuscript I had been working on, so now it's sort of public that I wrote this book, and that Little A is going to be publishing that. You know, some commercial work has come up that I'm excited about. Got to step into the role as a producer for a piece that DA Bullock is working on. So I'll wait till he kind of announces and shares that he was doing in community, celebrating elders. I'll give that kind of a hint. It's about back to the, and I think elders is a little heavy for, you know, being over 50, but I'm not there yet, and I am trying to wear my elder crown. Like I feel myself moving into that chapter, so I embrace it and am excited to get there someday. But that has been really fun, and just trying to just quietly move in support of the community, knowing that we're grieving a whole other thing here in the Twin Cities and in Minneapolis, and things that we survived that we're still trying to figure out in terms of community, in terms of safety, and policing, and race, and all of these things that Minnesota is grappling with. So I'm doing whatever I can, but I move quietly in those ways, in hopes that people who are really not okay right now because they don't have food, they don't have shelter, they don't have jobs, they don't have resources. There's a lot of need here. So I do consider myself quite privileged to get to spend the afternoon talking about art. You know, in the context of knowing there is so much suffering and struggling, and ways that It is a small town, as Kelly said. So the great thing is it's a small town, and the hard thing is it's a small town.
Right.
And this is happening here in Minneapolis at the same time that we're having this conversation, or we're doing the things that we're doing.
Kelly, your year, how's it been for you?
I was kind of feeling down last week. Like, what am I doing? I'm at home. Why aren't I making? Why aren't I doing? And some days it's just enough to get up, put on pants, and make sure my daughter shows up for distance learning, and that we get outside and get some fresh air. So I've cut myself some slack, and I'm forcing myself to shelve ambition a little bit and just exist and reconnect with my family and my friends and my community on a different level, and not be ambitious about it. Like Maya is saying, there's so much more going on that is so much more important than what film am I going to make next, or what job am I going to get next, that I've really had to force myself to not think that way, and think about what can I do to make the world around me better in a way that doesn't lead to something for me, for my career or my ambition. And so I'm cool with that. Like, I'm cool with that. And it's been good. It's been healing. And I think that we've been traumatized for 4 years. It's like I feel like we're stepping out of an abusive relationship, and we need to decompress. And it's not over yet. I mean, the death rattle is happening. This tyrant is not going to go away quietly. And so I'm sort of bracing myself and just trying to have my reserves ready to protect my family and my friends.
Well, I think that is the perfect place to stop. You are all so wise, and I'm just even more impressed with all of you than I was before. I want to thank you so much. I want to just hang out with all of you all the time. Thank you for being here. And everyone, please check out filmfatales.org and take advantage of what they have to offer, because it's just such a great organization. So thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
we'll talk soon.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Top line 3.